Much of the popular advice around nervous system health and healing of mind-body conditions suggests that the best way to heal is to calm, soothe, or regulate ourselves, to breathe deeply, to practice relaxation techniques, to engage in somatic practices, to effectively calm ourselves down, to reassure the mind, to distract with pleasant imagery, and so on. And while such strategies can offer temporary relief, which they undoubtedly do, they do not touch the root of what the nervous system is actually carrying if we have these chronic illnesses. And what most people don't realise, even in this space, is that the nervous system does not need to be calmed so much as it needs to be completed. And its capacity needs to be allowed. What it holds is not noise or dysfunction, but an enormous backlog. If you're ill, if you're here listening to me now, of life force, of repressed emotional energetic charge, of survival charge, incomplete trauma charges that's been repressed, contained, and frozen, often for decades and decades. And when the ego or culture has forbidden, as we know, the natural flow of feeling, these primary feelings that are fundamentally instinctual to the human body, the body itself becomes a vault, and it holds this energy, storing the unshed tears, the unexpressed anger, the unlived grief, and the unlived life, and the thwarted impulses to run or cry out if we were in danger. And these are not merely negative emotions, but the very energies that allow us to move, to orient, to protect ourselves, to be guided instinctually. They are our compass, and to feel connected and to live. The nervous system then is not waiting to be quieted or silenced or calmed or re-regulated. It is waiting for us to allow it to finish what was never allowed, what was interrupted, and what was started a very long time ago. So let's just look at emotions again. The word emotion, as you know, derives from Latin emovere, to move out. Energy in motion, emotion, and they're designed to move through the body quickly, carrying a charge of energy that motivates and guides us. And fear, for example, prepares the body to run or seek safety. It's the space between danger and escape. Anger mobilizes us to set boundaries and defend ourselves. Grief moves us to release what is lost and to reconnect and adapt to an environment minus the thing we've lost. Joy directs us towards that which sustains our lives. And effective neuroscience confirms that emotions are not abstract states, but whole body events. As Jaak Panksepp wrote, our emotional feelings reflect our ability to subjectively experience certain states of the nervous system. Jung referred to these emotions, these core instincts, as our truth. And every emotion corresponds to a physiological state, a readiness to act. They are pre-thought, they are pre-everything, they are immediate, inbuilt, and they're always true to us. If the emotion is allowed to complete, the body discharges the charge and naturally returns to balance, to set point, to homeostasis. But if the emotion is blocked by repression, shame, acculturation, a fear of overwhelm, the charge remains trapped in the body, in the tissues, in the psyche, and in the very body itself. It gets turned inward and held in a nervous system, just waiting for an opportunity when it can finally complete. The movement does not move unless we feel it naturally, as we should. Carl Jung observed we suffer very much from the fact that we consist of mind and have lost the body. And to lose the body is to lose the natural way emotions move. They should move out, they should move through. When an emotion is repressed, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it becomes frozen frozen into the muscular, the tissues, the cells, the fascia, the posture. It becomes embedded in autonomic nervous system loops and repeats over years and decades. Judith Herman, writing about trauma, put it plainly. The ordinary response to atrocities is to banish them from consciousness. Atrocities, however, refuse to be buried. And what is refused by consciousness lives on in the body, not just in memory, but in somatic memory. This is not just an abstract thing. And the nervous system carries it as unfinished business and eventually demands resolution. Peter Levine adds, what is not felt remains the same or is intensified, generating a cascade of virulent and corrosive emotions. Repression, therefore, is not neutral. It compounds suffering. What could have discharged in a moment, about 90 seconds actually, becomes decades of stored charge, symptoms, and then, as a result, dysregulation so as not to destroy our system. This is a natural consequence of what's happened, is that we will, as a symptom, dysregulate. Modern research confirms what depth psychology has long intuited. Unprocessed emotional energy is not simply psychological, it is stored in the body, as we say. The fascia, the connective tissue networks that envelop muscles and organs, acts like a living record of tension and contraction. Thomas Myers describes fascia as the body-wide fabric, and it's a fascinating thing through which stress, posture and emotion imprint themselves. Thomas Fuchs, writing on embodied affect, explains, emotions are not only represented in the brain, but also stored in the bodily and behavioural dispositions, which may be reactivated long after the original event. And this is what Bessel van der Kolk captures with his phrase, the body keeps the score. Emotional memory is not held only in explicit recollections, but in implicit, procedural and somatic form. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, locked jaws, collapsed postures, tight muscles, and of course, ultimately, our symptoms. And sleep research reinforces this picture. Matthew Walker and others show that REM sleep helps metabolize emotional salience, but when trauma prevents full processing, the nervous system keeps the unfinished charge alive. Trauma survivors often suffer, as a result, disturbed sleep, flashbacks or night terrors. The backlog is pressing for completion, even in our dreams. There's a myth of regulation that seems all pervasive at the moment because this backlog feels so overwhelming for us if we have trauma, if we have historically repressed our emotions and now experiencing mind-body conditions and chronic illness. Many nervous systems just aim to then try and regulate the nervous system or calm it. It seems a logical conclusion. But unfortunately, they should be allowing completion. Calming without completion is a kind of another postponement. It's I'll pay tomorrow, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow is another day. The charge doesn't go away. It just waits for longer. And sooner or later, what is postponed, I'm afraid, will insist, often through symptoms, flares, or breakdown. Deb Dana reminds us that the nervous system is not built merely for survival, but for connection. She says, the good news is that no matter how the nervous system has been shaped, the capacity for moving out of protection and returning to connection is built into our biology. And this, of course, is extremely hopeful. It's a constant process, always available to change if we allow it to. And it's actually blueprinted to do so. But this connection is not restored by bypassing the charge or soothing it away, unfortunately. It's restored by letting the charge move, to move out, emovere, bit by bit until the system no longer needs to defend against it. Pat Ogden captures this in her somatic approach. The body always leads us home, she says, and if we can simply learn to trust sensation and stay with it long enough for it to reveal appropriate action, movement, insight, or feeling. And it's always trying to bring us back to this home, to the balance, the equilibrium, the set point, the homeostasis. So it's not about imposing calm from the outside, as tempting as it seems, but about trusting the body's own inner order. Because this emotional charge, these emotions, are stored in the tissues, the fascia, the nervous system patterns, many approaches promise cathartic relief, talking about releasing emotions or releasing trauma. But forced release is, I'm afraid, potentially very dangerous. The ego can stir up emotion explosively through aggressive techniques, dramatic crying, screaming, or body manipulation. But this often overwhelms the system because the ego wants rid of it. I need to get rid of this thing. You can feel it. It's like a thing you want to get out of you. And you can feel it. It's an absolute charge. Even if you're on bed with fatigue, you can feel it buzzing away. It's in there. It's frozen in there, and it's coming through in small amounts. And it's so tempting to think, I'll just engage with something and then it will be gone. But this is a two-step program, and it's not as simple as that. Because the problem in releasing in this way, people try and go for, trauma releases by all these various things, or breath work, or ayahuasca, or, forced emotional retrieval, is that it misses out the second part. The problem is in the integrating phase afterwards. Without integration, the nervous system has no chance to update its circuitry. So the ego can release quite easily, okay? But then the material will flood back in cycles, leaving the person re-traumatized. And I'm afraid to say, I know a number of people who are in this situation now that have taken ayahuasca. They might have done some of the aggressive breath work, trauma, some of these other deep digs for emotional release, to have a huge emotional release, which will feel cathartic, only to be left with this energy cycling round and round in consciousness, now released from the shadow, from the body, from the shadow of the body and the psyche, but is still being refused the update by the ego that's blocking it, because it's too big a charge. It's just defending it. True healing is not about discharge as spectacle. It's not a great big hit. It's about discharge as completion in micro doses, paced in a titrated schema. And that's already chosen for you naturally by the self, if we know how to allow it. Levine emphasizes this principle of titration. Trauma is not what happened to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. And if we force release without safety, the empathetic witness is just our ability to be neutral with what is going to feel incredibly intense. The system remains unwitnessed. The true self, the self, is not engaged. And the ego replays its defensive loop, and the cycle repeats over and over again. So this is why we have to engage in a slow discharge process. This work, for people who've been ill for a very long time, will take a number of years, I'm afraid. Completion happens not by force, but by creating space. The key is microdosing our awareness, our ability to allow. Dropping into the body for brief moments, many times a day, allowing the sensation to be felt just as it is, without trying to control it. And it moves through. Within a schedule, and it integrates. It will feel incredibly unpleasant. The release itself will often feel okay. Tremor, wave of heat, tightness in the chest. These are the language of the body's discharging this energy, what it's been holding in the nervous system. And each time we make space for a fragment of sensation, often now fronting as symptoms in our body, a fragment of the charge is released. And over time, the backlog empties. But it has to then be allowed to integrate. And the second part is often an amplification of symptoms. This is what people would call a flare within the cycle of the schedule of this schema we're talking about. And that's when it's all the way through. Has to be done that way. So we have to do it in small enough amounts in a schedule so that the flare is bearable. And then it's through. This is why nervous system work, if we're going to call it that, must be slow and steady. The ego, which originally suppressed the material because once it was too much to be felt, too overwhelming, unsupported, unwitnessed, finds the process utterly confronting and destabilizing. Chaos, fear or disorientation may arise in the body as this energy moves again. So as we start to do this work, we will have an increase in symptoms. We will often have an increase in somatic anxiety. This is normal. This is the ego's defense. And if we understand that what feels like chaos is actually the nervous system reorganizing and reordering itself, completing what was unfinished, this changes everything. But it has to be at a level that's bearable because it's pretty flipping unbearable. As Jung noticed, every human is relative because everything rests on an inner polarity. For everything is a phenomenon of energy. This is your emotions. This is your life force. And energy blocked becomes symptoms. Energy allowed completes and restores balance, and symptoms will no longer be necessary. So anyone who's familiar with the work I talk about here, the practical implication is clear. We must allow the backlog to discharge, but we must do so in a way that is safe, paced and sequenced. And this means we never dig for emotions. We never force emotional release. We never push beyond what the body naturally brings. And we never try and interfere with what the nervous system is doing. We welcome its expression. We don't need to calm ourselves down. And this is why we create a daily schedule of allowing, of being able to exist in a way that means we can hold the space for this discharge to happen and stay as an allower to be that empathetic witness so it can finally move through. This is why we have to slow ourselves down, live a life that means we can do the same thing over and over again, thereby signaling it's now safe to feel this. And in these windows throughout the day, we will deliberately feel in to the body, checking in to become re-embodied and let this energy move through. Dropping in, meeting what's present, not forcing it, just being there to make space for the nervous system to do what it knows how to do, to release naturally some of this held energy. Nothing to do with forcing it. Bit by bit, the charge discharges. You will not feel better in the moment. This is not what it's about. This is a long haul, and this is the way it works. Because this process is not sequenced by the ego, but by the self, by nature itself, by the innate intelligence of the body's wisdom, the deeper organizing principle of the psyche and the body. And remember, this is mind-body conditions. It's no good just talking about the brain and trying to retrain the brain, because this is a mind-body condition. The self knows what needs to arise and when. And our task is to simply provide the structure, the support, the rhythm, and by allowing the permission for this to naturally occur. And in this way, the nervous system, finally given permission to discharge what's been held in the shadow of the body, in the body, and of the shadow of the psyche. It's been holding these memories, these incomplete emotional charges, all of the things we weren't able to feel, aspects of self, this shadow material. We don't avoid or overwhelm. Over time, what once felt like unbearable chaos becomes integration. Slow, slow, slow. And the ego, though disorientated at first, learns eventually to trust what the system is updating itself in alignment with, which is truth. And by having a schedule, this gives the consistency and control the ego seeks, so it becomes less resistant and actually is a partner that consents to this process. When the backlog, we talk about this load in the shadow, this allostatic load, these charges that we've built up and held in the body and obviously in the shadow, in everything we haven't been able to feel or be or say or do over years often. When it's allowed to discharge through the body, the nervous system gradually restores the natural flow of primary emotions. And these are, please look at the videos on primary and second emotions to be clear on this. The embodied, raw and regulatory emotions that are by design run the nervous system effectively and keep us regulated. They motivate action, they guide coherence, and they maintain balance. And when we cut them off and we repress them because they were too much once when we were too little, we rely on the emotions about the emotions, these mental interpretations of emotions that sort of are inhibitory. And in contrast, these secondary emotions, often things like shame, resentment, guilt, anxiety, they become loops. They are not primary flows of life force, but compensations, and they actually have a blocking and inhibitory effect. They're essentially defences deployed often by the ego to keep those core, once overwhelming, deeper primary emotions in the shadow. They arise as the ego's attempt to manage or block these primary, raw, instinctual emotions that are our life force and the regulators of the nervous system. So the result is not just symptom relief as we start to allow this discharge of these primary emotions to come through, but an entirely new orientation to life, return to vitality, spontaneity, and of course, connection, not just to ourselves, our true selves, but to everything around us. Healing is not calming. It is restoring life force. It is chaotic and brutal at times in the way a hurricane is the thing that restores the balance to a small ecosystem. And this restoration of life force through a system that has been in stasis, that has been blocked at every level, this is raw energy moving through the body and the psyche. Jung saw the psyche as fundamentally energetic. He said at the root of all these disturbances we find repressed psychic contents that have become unconscious. These are real physical things. The mind and the body is experiencing these. Are not just airy-fairy concepts. And when these contents that have been repressed or denied, buried, exiled, are allowed to be reintegrated, the psyche is no longer split. The nervous system no longer burdened by unfinished charges. And effective neuroscience supports this. Jaak Panksepp emphasised that emotions are whole body events, as I said, and you can feel it when you do this work with both physiological and subjective aspects. The nervous system is not a passive machine, but an energetic system that constantly seeks completion, constantly moving, flowing, moving out and through. And therefore, to allow the restoration of this process, to allow the discharge, is to let the nervous system update itself. It doesn't feel nice. And each release is like an old program being uninstalled, making room for new connections, new patterns of coherence, and of course, balance. So in conclusion, the nervous system, as horrible as this feels, and I really get it, and it doesn't need us to calm it. It doesn't need us to soothe it and calm it and tap it away and re-regulate it. It needs us to support, to let it complete what it's been carrying for decades, slowly, in a schedule, that we can allow this unleashing of this raw power to move through. Completion is not a technique imposed from the outside, as so many of these modalities say, but it's an inner movement allowed from within. The technique is allowing. And by God, that is the greatest technique on earth, to allow yourself to be with something that your ego, who you think you are, finds utterly terrifying, is the greatest skill there is. And this is why we have to confront and feel this stuff slowly and steadily. And the backlog discharges only when we create space for it to move, bit by bit, in safe, scheduled ways. It will feel chaotic, destabilizing, but it is order for the body. It's the body's way of returning us to the truth, to our nature, to ourselves. True calm is never forced. These are not sets of exercises you do or breathing you do or whatever. It is the natural outcome of energy that has been discharged. It is the calm after hundreds of storms that we have to weather to get to that place. And we all want to support each other on this journey with this information to encourage us as it feels so bad, with the guided exercises, with the somatic embodiment we talk about, coming back to ourselves, learning to allow, learning to support. And when we no longer fear the charge, and the charge often is fear itself, the nervous system can finally rest, come back to where it should be. It doesn't have to hold so much anymore. And it's not because we calmed or silenced it. It's because we allowed it finally to express itself.